And yeah, we start this session about RSE communities with some international impressions. And my first talker is Dan Katz from University of Illinois, and he's talking about the US-RSE and what's happening there currently.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, this sounds like it's very loud. Okay. Right. So yeah, I'm going to talk about US-RSE. It's, I think, interesting to compare the different RSE organizations in the different countries, the UK, US here, Netherlands, and other countries. And so hopefully this will be interesting to people that are involved in de-RSE. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so just to start off with a little bit of history and about US-RSE. So the mission of US-RSE has 4 parts. One is to effectively to build a professional community. One is to advocate for research software and research software engineers. One third is to provide resources to RSEs and their groups. And the fourth is to promote and encourage and improve diversity within the RSE community. So in 2018, the US part of the International RSE survey that the UK led, we added a question that said, would you be interested in volunteering to help start a US RSE community? And a number of people, about 10, said yes to that. There was also an international RSE leaders meeting in the UK, and there were 5 people from the US that came to that, and there was some overlap between the 10 and the 5. But we ended up with a set of these people that started a Slack channel, created a GitHub site, created a website, made a logo, got a domain, all that basic stuff. Although I will comment that unlike the German organization, there was no legal organization, there was no official organization, it was just a group of people that wanted to work together. At the end of the year, there were 9 people that were the membership. So that's what we did in that first year, was basically organize ourselves. In the next year, we started a mailing list, started using social media, Twitter at that time, which we didn't realize was going to be the mess that it is now. We created an initial website. We started a job board, created a steering committee, created a structure for the steering committee and how it was elected, printed some stickers because it seemed like that was important to help get people aware of what was going on. We had some workshops at some other conferences, PERC, which is a kind of US HPC conference, more or less. And then the supercomputing conference, we started newsletters, and we tried to get out newsletters every 2 months, although we didn't always succeed. We started monthly community calls that we did pretty well at, and we received a grant to host a community building workshop. So in 2019, we thought we were going to have an in-person community building workshop in 2020. But then in 2020, as you know, we had COVID, so we didn't do that. But at the end of the year, we were up to 260 people. In 2020, we started working groups. So we had a website group, a diversity, equity, and inclusion group, and an education and training group. We had our first steering committee elections to replace the people that had appointed themselves initially. We started annual general meetings. We had a virtual workshop, and that's what we did in place of the community workshop that we postponed until after COVID. Again, we held workshops at 2 meetings in the US, and we were up to about 600 people at the end of the year. 2021, we joined Open Collective as a financial sponsor so that we had a place that we could put money that was not any one university. Created a new version of the website, started a speaker series for diversity, equity, and inclusion, created a new logo that you can see up there, held our virtual workshop, and again, we held a couple of other workshops, and we were up to about 900 people at the end of the year. 2022, we ended up actually then doing the in-person workshop that we had gotten funding for in 2019 because COVID was close enough to over that we felt like we could do it without too much risk. We started a funder talk series where we got people from different funding agencies to talk to us about what was going on in those funding agencies and what RSEs could apply for and what information RSEs could give to those funding agencies to help them. We had our first booth, or stand if you want in the UK term, at the Supercomputing 22 conference, and we were up to about 1,500 people at the end of the year. And then last year, we changed our financial sponsor to community initiatives because this made us able to take federal grants from the US as well as private donations. We held workshops at 2 international conferences. We received an award from the Sloan Foundation that gave us funding to hire an executive director at halftime. and to hire a community manager at full-time. We held our first conference in October. We produced some joint documents, one with a group called deRSE, which is the Academic Data Science Alliance, about how to hire, manage, and retain both data scientists and research software engineers in academia, as well as creating a research software engineer career path and a career guidebook that we did with the IEEE Computer Society. And at the end of the year, we were up to 2,200 people. Okay, so that's kind of a little history. If I think about what's been successful, I think first has been membership growth, without any question. So we're up to about 2,400 people now. And this has been fairly steady with little bumps at different times because of different events and different publicity. Our members are located primarily in the US, but we have people from all over the world. We say that we're focused on US things, but if people are interested, we're happy to have members from other places as well. We've done a lot of work in community forming, primarily through working groups, but also through other groups. And so on the left side, you can see a bunch of different kinds of working groups ranging from DEI that I mentioned before, education and training. We have a working group on working groups, basically, like how do we manage groups. We have a working group on RSEs and national labs and how they work, which is different than RSEs in academia. We have affinity groups as well, so we have a group leaders network, and we have a neuroscience group that's one of the first kind of disciplinary groups that we've created. And then we have some regional groups as well. So these groups, in some cases, represent a city or a region. In some cases, they're a bigger region. In some cases, these regions are close to the size of Germany. So it's because we have a big country, it makes it kind of hard to get people together in places. And so having regional groups, we think, makes a lot of sense. We also have the idea of trying to look at sub-communities and trying to use that as a way of addressing common challenges, maybe that are focused on a discipline, but not necessarily focused across everything. So again, the neuroscience one is something that we're starting. There's a physics and astronomy group that we have on Slack, but isn't actually a working group yet. We think there may be more that come, like one that'll be focused on geophysics. We're looking at different things across different kinds of jobs, national labs, industry, students, personal characteristics. There's an LGBTQ group. Again, geography, because of the size, we're trying to look at regional groups. And then we also have groups that are focused on particular technical challenges. So people are members of multiple groups, and they're kind of cross-cutting in different ways. We've done a lot of stuff with community organized events, again, starting with community calls. And there's been more or less one of these a month, and there's a few more kind of coming. And just to give you an idea of what they are, DEI has a speaker series as well as a media club where people watch a movie or read a book or listen to a podcast and then come together and discuss it. The education and training seminar series is probably the biggest group that we have in terms of people that attend. And then the funder series I mentioned before. We've also done standalone events. So I mentioned previously, 2 years ago, we had a community building workshop at Princeton where we were basically trying to get a bunch of people together to figure out how do we start new working groups, how do we actually get things going, how do we get more people involved, and that was quite successful. We have a virtual workshop that we had in 2022 that basically led towards the in-person conference that was in 2023. And this handbook that I mentioned about career paths in academia came out of a workshop where people got together for 3 days and did a lot of writing in person. In terms of conference events, as I've mentioned before, we've done things at a lot of conferences, PERC, eScience, supercomputing. In most of these, we try to have some kind of a workshop, some kind of a session. At supercomputing, the last 2 years, we've actually had a booth where people kind of come up to us and they learn about what is an RSE, and sometimes, oh, I'm an RSE, that's interesting. I mentioned also previously we had the Sloan Award, which I think was actually quite a big deal for us. It was a proposal in 2022 and 23 that basically recognized that our growth was limited by having all volunteer effort and that we had some funding that was really going to help us a lot. And so this gave us about $800,000 over 2 years, and it's supporting, as I mentioned before, half-time executive director, full-time community manager, a bunch of different things to help grow the community and give community members some funding to participate in things where they don't have it. 2 awards that we're going to be giving out for the first time at our conference this fall, and then some organizational tools and some community health things. So just as an example, our steering committee elections, we didn't really have a good way of knowing who our membership was or running those elections, and so we're paying a company a little bit of money to provide that service for us. We had our conference, I mentioned, last year was the first time. We had 250 spaces, we sold out, so that was quite exciting. The Sloan Award helped us actually do that because it gave us the money up front to reserve the space that then we used registration to pay for again afterwards. We had a lot of sponsoring organizations, lots of committees, lots of volunteers that worked on things. Neil Chu Hong and Marianne Leung were keynote speakers, Neil on the SSI and history of RSE and Marianne on diversity. We had a panel of funders, 90 contributed in peer-reviewed submissions in a variety of types. Not quite as many as here, which it's interesting to see. I think there's actually an amazing amount of stuff going on here. Student program and sponsor lightning talks. And we're gonna have a second conference this fall in Albuquerque, New Mexico. That will be similar to the first conference, slightly larger, and we're gonna make it more hybrid. The first time we just did it in person because we weren't sure how to do hybrid very well and didn't want to focus on that, but this time we feel like we can try to add that. We also have been successful, I think, in increasing awareness of the RSE role and title in the US. So the job board particularly has been successful for us. We've had 480 jobs that we've advertised in the last roughly 2 years, 2.5 years. Currently there's 20 open positions as RSEs. There's 3 related positions, like an RSE manager or something else like that, but not an RSE. And there's 8 internship opportunities for students, mostly over the summer. These are easy to submit. We review them and post them in Slack, in Mastodon. I don't think we actually do Twitter anymore. Sorry, I should have taken that off. And so we've seen from this, I think, an increased use of the RSE title in new jobs. We've also had 2 special issues of Computing and Science and Engineering that focused on research software engineers in the US, and so that, again, kind of helped us within the computational science community get some awareness. And then finally, I'll just say that one of the calls from the National Science Foundation that I have some quotes from here mentions research software engineers a few times, and in one case it actually mentions down at the bottom the US-RSE Association as an area that people could talk to if they were interested in collaborating. So I think the fact that we've gotten funders on board to recognize RSEs and US-RSE has also been, I think, important to us. Okay, so that's all the good stuff. But then there's also a bunch of challenges. And so I'm going to kind of close the last part of this by talking about some of these challenges that we still have. And some of them are actually new challenges. Some of them have been challenges for quite a while. So one of them, which is a new one, is will funding hurt volunteerism? So before we had this funding, any action needed to have volunteers who were going to do it. And so this really led to pretty strong community ownership over what we were doing. Now that we have some paid staff, we have to really avoid volunteers saying, well, I'm not going to do this for nothing. Somebody's being paid, so why don't they do it instead? So we have to try to figure out how to mix those 2 things together and make it clear what staff can do and what volunteers still are going to need to do. We have to justify that distinction between staff and volunteers as well. We think there will also be other issues that will arise, and the steering committee is going to have to keep an eye on this. But I will say that one of the benefits that we've seen already is having this community manager whose job is to manage and grow the community seems to be successful at this point. It seems like we've gotten more people involved in more of these activities, and even the activities that have been around for a while seem like they have a little bit of new energy now. So another thing then is how do we actually avoid volunteer burnout? So I don't know how this is working in de-RSE, if this has been an issue or not, but now that we've been around for 6 or 7 years, a number of the people have been involved from the beginning. And so how do we keep them interested and bring in new people and not have them feel like, I've just done too much of this, I'm going to stop now. And it's interesting to see that at the steering committee level, all but 2 of the original steering committee members have been replaced. And we've had 9 candidates in 2022 for 4 positions, 8 last year for 5 positions. And so it seems like we're getting enough people that are interested that that's healthy. We have an increasing number of working groups forming, which is great. This needs an increasing number of people to lead and sustain these working groups, which is a little bit of a challenge. and some groups might end if not enough people are interested in continuing them, and that's probably okay. But I will say one of the challenges that we've had is on our website group, we've never really had great people that wanted to step up and be leaders of that and lead it. We've had people that were willing to do some work. But that's an example of a place where we've had difficulty finding volunteers that wanted to fulfill a particular role. We have about 400 active members on Slack every week. Community calls often have about 50 people. Education and training seminars often have 75 to 100 people. So we get different sets of people in different events. And overall, if having about a fifth of our community active each week is good, I don't know. It would be interesting to know how this compares with other groups, but it seems like it's probably reasonable at this point. One of the issues that we have, and this is actually an issue that I also see in RDA, the Research Data Alliance, is that you can join US-RSE, you can join RDA, but there's no process to leave. And so both organizations probably inflate their membership numbers to some extent with anybody who's ever joined because you don't know who's active currently. You don't even know who's alive, which is a different issue. In 2022 and 2023, we had less than 200 members that were voting for the steering committee out of the roughly 2,000. And so is 10% of people voting a concern? Is that good? Is that bad? I don't actually know. I think it's a little bit of a concern, but I'm not completely sure. And so, yeah, so I think one of the issues, though, is that it's just unclear what fraction of people should be doing different things, and if we're in a healthy state or if we're in a state where we need to worry about some of these things, and we don't really know yet. Okay, another thing is, as I mentioned, we have this 800K over 2 years, 400K a year, supporting staff, initiatives, awards, organizational tools. What are we going to do after the 2 years ends when we started depending on this money to do all these things and to pay for these people? So UK Society has membership that's about $25 a year. If we did this in the US and we had a similar fraction of the community that became public paying members, we would get about $8,000 a year. So that's not going to cover $400,000 a year, so that's not our answer. It may be a partial answer, I don't know, but we need something else as well. So other options are organizational memberships from universities, from national labs, from industry potentially, sponsorships, which maybe could be from industry, revenue from events, training fees, additional funder support, whether that's non-government philanthropic or government. And so this is one of the main challenges that the current paid staff are really worrying about is how are they going to get the organization to a point where they can continue in 2 years? How do we transition to a new steering committee chair eventually? So Ian Cosden has been the committee chair from the beginning, and he was one of those initial people that started everything in 2018. And that's been great, and it's provided a lot of continuity, but it's unhealthy for an organization to be dependent on one person, and how we actually move forward isn't completely clear to me. We do have a steering committee alumni channel on Slack that kind of brings in previous expertise and lets the current community know what other people think from the past. And maybe having professional staff will help smooth this transition when we have it, but I think I would say for me, this is one of the things that I've been talking to Ian about for the last at least 2 years, maybe 3 years, is how are you going to leave and what are we going to do when that happens? And I don't think we have a great answer yet. Another thing is professional benefits for members. So what do members actually get out of being in US-RSE? We don't completely know. I mean, we know what people volunteer to do, and we know that we're getting members, so people see something in it, but we don't have a complete understanding of why people join and what else they would like yet. So we are thinking about a membership-wide survey, which we have actually never done. We also can see what people volunteer to do, which kind of gives us some idea of what they're interested in. And we're also interested in looking at what other societies do. So the UK and German RSE societies, we'd like to understand kind of what they're providing to members and what members of those societies find valuable. But we're also thinking about other disciplinary societies like IEEE or ACM or AGU or AAS or any of these to see kind of what do they do and what can we learn from them. We're not exactly a disciplinary society in some ways, but in some ways we are. And so then how do we actually provide those kind of benefits? And we would be very happy to collaborate with other societies. So if there is, for example, something that we can do with de-RSE, we'd be very happy to talk about that and figure out how we do that in some way, or the UK Society or any others, or the Computer Society or any of these. We do have working groups that let members come together to provide benefits and to learn from each other. And in some cases, like the training group, this provides direct benefits that people learn how to do training and they learn about training materials. And in some cases, it provides indirect benefits, right? Because there's some mentoring that happens in these groups, and that just makes people happy that they're learning from people and they're getting connected to other people. The annual conference we see as a place to get credit for work that doesn't really fit into other venues and to connect with others. So last year and this year, we've been publishing our proceedings as open access publications through Zenodo. For most RSEs, it seems like that's a good answer. For some people that are RSEs that are also having an academic position, they're not as happy with that because they would rather see something that's showing up in a journal that their institution recognizes. So that's another challenge, is what's the right thing. Again, we've done these guidebooks that we think are providing some benefits to members. And then I think finally is how do we actually make progress on common problems? And common is a really hard thing to define. The US is federal. I mean, Germany is federal as well, but the US is federal in a more distributed way in some sense, I think. And it's extremely decentralized in a lot of ways, and it's physically large. So when we schedule calls, we have to worry about people in 5 time zones often, which really gives us a few hours in the middle of the day that we can schedule things effectively. The national culture mostly ties us together, and high-level policy and funding agencies also definitely provide some ties. But we have to work at multiple levels, at local levels, where local can be an institution, or it can be a system, or it can be a state, or a discipline, or a kind of an organization, or a funder, as well as at the national level, and as well at the global level, where that is the right thing to do, where we have common global problems. We want to work together on those as well. And so we want to then build methods to share lessons and collaborate across these levels as much as we can. We do want to use virtual meetings as much as we can, and so most of the things that we do are virtual, but we also want to have this one annual meeting that is mostly in person, as well as when people are coming in person to other events, and there's a bunch of RSEs going to a disciplinary conference, we want to provide them some venue to come together, whether it's a workshop or whether it's a social event in the evening or something else. Okay, so having said all of that, just to kind of finish things off, so we've been, I think, pretty successful over 6 to 7 years, starting with a small group of people, moving to 200 times growth in community. Almost everything we've done has gone through at least one cycle of replanning and refreshing, in some cases 2. And we think we've had pretty good impact on the external RSE community and on some institutions and funders. Going forward, we now do have professional staff in addition to volunteers, and these then allow us to have some extra stability, hopefully help community growth, and then, on the other hand, lead to sustainability challenges of how we keep paying for them. Annual conferences, I think, is important. An increased impact on institutions and other parts of the larger research ecosystem are also important. As I said before, we're focused on US impact, but we welcome people from other countries because a lot of topics really are global. They're not really regional or national. And we see ourselves as open and want to collaborate with other groups and associations and societies, and particularly on outreach and advocacy issues. And so I will just leave up one slide that has some quotes and some kind of successes about things that are great. And I'll just add, I think one quote that we hear is occasionally is when people come to us and they say, I didn't know I was an RSE. It's great to know that there are other people like me. Or this has helped me find a job that really is the kind of thing that I really wanted to do. So there's some things that have been really great, and in general, they've come from people that wanted to work together to help each other. And I'll stop there. So thank you.